There's someone you know, maybe it's you, who prefers being alone over a crowded room, who asks questions nobody else thought to ask, who changes their mind mid-conversation, not because they're confused, but because they just heard something that made them think differently. Most people don't recognize what they're looking at, because the habits of an extremely intelligent mind don't always look like intelligence. Sometimes they look like weirdness. Sometimes they look like weakness. But psychology tells a very different story. Habit 1. They spend a lot of time alone. You've probably noticed that some of the most quietly intelligent people you've ever met aren't the loudest ones in the room. They're the ones near the window, the ones who leave the party early, the ones who seem genuinely fine, maybe even relieved when plans get canceled. This isn't antisocial behavior, and it's not shyness either. Research from the London School of Economics found that people with higher IQs often report times less time satisfaction from frequent social interaction, not because human connection doesn't matter to them, but because their cognitive system has a different hunger. It craves something that crowds can't give it. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for deep thinking, planning, and reflection, needs low stimulation to do its best work. When there's constant noise, constant input, constant social performance, that part of the brain gets crowded out. Solitude isn't emptiness for a high IQ mind. It's fuel. So the next time someone seems to prefer their own company, don't assume they're lonely. They might just be doing their most important work. Habit 2. They are constantly curious. It starts with a simple question. Why does this work the way it does? Why do people behave like that? What would happen if this one thing changed? And then an hour disappears. People with very high IQs don't experience curiosity the way most people do as a passing interest. For them, curiosity is closer to a biological drive. Neuroscience shows us why. When the brain encounters a gap in its knowledge, it releases dopamine, the same chemical involved in hunger and desire. That dopamine doesn't just feel good. It compels the brain to seek more. Psychologists call this the times curiosity loop. And in high IQ individuals, this loop runs with unusual intensity. One question genuinely leads to 30. One article becomes a 3-hour research spiral, not because they lack focus, but because their brain is designed to keep pulling on threads until the pattern reveals itself. The world sometimes calls this scattered. Psychology calls it a relentlessly active pattern recognition system, and that system never really clocks out. Habit 3. They talk to themselves. If you've ever caught yourself quietly narrating your own thinking, walking through a problem out loud, rehearsing a conversation, describing what you're doing as you do it, you might have felt a little self-conscious about it. Don't be. Psychologists call this times self-directed speech, and research consistently shows it improves cognitive performance. When you speak your thoughts out loud, even in a whisper, you're forcing your brain to organize internal information into structured language. That process strengthens working memory and improves focus on complex tasks. For a high IQ brain that's running multiple cognitive threads at once, self-talk acts like a traffic controller. It slows the internal noise, prioritizes what matters, and creates a kind of temporary external record the brain can reference. It looks strange from the outside, but on the inside, it's one of the most efficient things a thinking mind can do. Habit 4. They're comfortable saying, "I don't know." Here's something that surprises people. The more intelligent someone is, the more willing they tend to be to admit they don't have an answer. This seems backwards. Shouldn't smarter people know more? They do know more, but they're also more aware of how much they don't know. Cognitive scientists describe this as metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking, to accurately assess the limits of your own knowledge. You've probably heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect, the tendency for people with limited knowledge to overestimate their competence. Highly intelligent people often experience the opposite. The deeper they go into any subject, the more clearly they see its complexity. And that visibility makes them genuinely reluctant to speak beyond what they actually understand. This can look like uncertainty. It can look like hesitation. But what it actually is intellectual honesty. And that is one of the rarest and most underrated forms of intelligence there is. We're only 4 habits in, and already you might be recognizing someone. Maybe yourself, maybe someone you've misread for years. Because here's the thing about extremely intelligent people. their habits often get mislabeled. The next habit is one of the most misunderstood of all. People call it a flaw. Psychology calls it something else entirely. Habit 5. They overthink small things. You make plans with a high IQ person and they ask 10 clarifying questions before saying yes. You send a simple text and they reply 3 hours later because they spent time thinking through the right response. You watch them pause before making a decision that seems, from the outside, completely obvious. From the outside, this looks like indecision. It looks like anxiety. It looks like a problem. But what's actually happening is that their brain is running what psychologists call times multiple mental models, times simultaneously. Before committing to any answer, they're simulating outcomes, weighing variables, identifying what could go wrong. The prefrontal cortex, when highly developed, doesn't easily accept the first available solution. It keeps running the simulation. Researchers connect this to what's called analysis paralysis, not weakness, but a brain that takes its own processing seriously. The cost is slowness. The gift is accuracy. And most highly intelligent people have quietly learned to live somewhere between the two. Habit 6. They have a strong sense of humor. This one surprises people. We don't always picture the deeply intellectual person as the funny one. But research published in intelligence and cognitive science journals shows a consistent, measurable link between high IQ and advanced humor processing. Here's why that makes sense. Humor, real humor, not just laughing at obvious things, requires the brain to hold two contradictory ideas at once, recognize where an expectation was violated, and bridge two unrelated concepts in a way that feels surprising but inevitable. That is not a simple cognitive task. It's the same kind of mental flexibility that allows a high IQ brain to see patterns others miss, to connect ideas across unrelated fields, and to recognize irony in situations most people take at face value. For a mind that's always processing the complexity of the world, humor is often a release valve, a way of acknowledging how strange and contradictory everything is without needing to fix it. Look back at all 10 habits and you'll notice they're all versions of the same thing. A brain that takes the world seriously. It takes solitude seriously because it needs it to think. It takes questions seriously because it refuses to stop asking them. It takes other people seriously enough to watch them before speaking. It takes truth seriously enough to change its mind. Every habit on this list, the late nights, the self-talk, the discomfort with easy answers, is the same engine running in different directions. Not a personality quirk, not a collection of flaws, a way of processing the world at depth. Intelligence was never really about what you know. It was always about how your brain moves through uncertainty, how it stays curious when certainty would be easier, how it keeps asking the next question even when the first one still hasn't been fully answered. If these habits sound familiar, if you recognize yourself somewhere in this list, then maybe this is the thing worth carrying with you. The brain that makes your life more complicated is the same brain that sees further than most. That's not a burden to manage. That's just how telescopes work.